3.
Emperor, we come for you! We come for you!
Did IQs just drop sharply while I was away?
Long live the fighters!
I saw that.
Yeah, you did.
I turned it on just in time too. That was great.
All right.
Oh my goodness. Hello everybody and welcome to another episode of the Fusion Underground. I think we're on episode 8, if I'm not mistaken. Episode 8. Yes, we are on episode 8. I know, right?
That's crazy.
It seems like they just keep coming. We keep doing this whole thing.
Every week.
It's like every week there's a new one. It's just like magic.
It's crazy. Every Tuesday rolls around every week without fail.
Oh my gosh. Episode 8. Yeah. Well, welcome to all 5 listeners. I hope you've been enjoying the show. A couple of days ago, we did a DLC, which was a lot of fun. You should check that out. We talked about My Little Pony. We talked about the Masters, the golf tournament. We talked about Cyberpunk 2077. It was just an all-around
we
fun
were everywhere.
show.
Even Cards Against Humanity too.
Cards Against Humanity was in there.
Yeah, we had a blast. I had a lot of fun doing that.
Yeah. So we just released that a couple of days ago. Yesterday, Thursday. I don't even remember. The days all seem to blur together now. But now we're here to do episode 8 of the actual show. So here at the Fusion Underground, what we do is we try to make sense of the world by having what we consider to be principled discussions about such topics as entertainment, current events, politics, and culture. And our mission is to educate people to become critical thinkers so they can live more empowered and happier lives. As always, I'm your host, Manuel Ramirez, and I'm joined by my co-host in the our virtual studio by my brother and good friend, Jason Moret. How are you doing, sir?
I'm doing good, brother. Doing good.
It's good to see you.
You too. It's been a while. I don't know, a couple days.
36 hours. Something like that, right?
Yeah, something like that. I think it was. Yeah.
Go ahead and stop sharing that so we can see you in all your glory.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Captain Steal the Thunder.
So we've got quite a bit of an action-packed show, I suppose. Today's episode, we're going to be talking about, is it better to be treated equally or fairly? It's an interesting question. I think it's an interesting question to ask. Intriguing. So I asked you to think about that. But before we get into that, before we jump into the actual topic itself, is there anything that new that you've been dealing with on your end, or is it just kids and work?
Kids and work and stuff needing to get fixed around the house, and not enough time to do all of that all at once. I was just I had a pump go out of my washing machine, so I got to mess with that. So all the fun stuff that normal everyday American blokes have to deal with. I'm stealing a phrase from my brother now. It's just anytime anything else goes wrong, you just go, of course.
It is what it is.
One more thing. Of course it did. Of course that went out. Of course I had another issue show up at work that I didn't know how to deal with. Of course, the kid had a blowout at school and now I've got poopy clothes that we can't wash because the washing machine took up. Of course it did.
Of course.
Yeah.
Well, in the meantime, there's been a Steam sale going on.
Steam sale, like buying hot water?
No. For anybody who plays video games on the computer.
Oh, yes.
Steam. And I picked up 2 games.
Did you really? What'd you get?
I picked up 2 games. Watch Dogs 1 and Watch Dogs 2. I was able to get both of them for like $15.
Oh, wow.
And I've been playing through Watch Dogs 1, and I've been really enjoying it. It's like this hacker, not totally cyberpunk, but you do a lot of hacking and throughout the game, and it's kind of like a mixture of cyberpunk with Grand Theft Auto.
Yeah,
But
I remember seeing some of that stuff. It was
Yeah.
a little bit of a high tech kind of
Yeah.
GTA
Yeah.
running around. I was interested in it, and then wasn't interested enough to buy it at full price because I don't pay full price for much of anything, and then forgot about it when it went on sale. So you have to tell me how it is.
Yeah, the first one was only like $8, $7 or something like that.
Yeah.
I really enjoy it, but I'm really, really bad at the driving. So it's just so terrible. I'm playing on a mouse, mouse and keyboard, because I'm playing on the computer, and the controls just are not good for driving in the game with mouse and keyboard.
So I have learned something about video games.
Mm-hmm.
My good buddy TJ, he is amazing at first-person shooters. He's really good at combat games. You put him behind the wheel in any video game, I don't care. He's bound to hit a tree and a mountain at the same time.
I'm hitting everything in the city.
He can't drive a car to save his life.
Yeah.
So when we play co-op, it's just understood. I drive, he shoots. That's the way it works, and it works out well.
Yeah. So. I can't. I have to get the crappy cars.
Yeah.
Like when I'm running around and I need to get across the city, I jack a car that
handles terrible, doesn't have a lot of speed because you can actually manage it.
Because I can actually manage it. Yeah. If I get behind the wheel of like some souped up sports car or whatever,
you're just crashed and nothing flat.
Oh man. And I can't doing donuts and everything. I'm like, I'm just trying to go through the intersection. Yeah, it's terrible.
Yeah.
So I have to drive
that's
the
in the
crappy
game
cars.
You're talking about, not
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, because I run around and I jack cars all day long.
Hey, we talked about free expression, I guess, but
oh, good Lord.
Yeah.
So I'm looking forward to completing this game. I'm still in Act 1, and I've been playing for a few hours today, probably 5 hours. I wasn't doing anything. So
nice.
Yeah,
so I'm usually way behind the times when it comes to games coming out if I play anything. I just finished last week South Park's A Stick of Truth, which I think came out like 8 years ago. I don't even know.
Yeah, something like that, yeah.
But it was $5, and I was like, all right, well, that's cool.
Yeah, sure, why not?
Because that's about my price point.
Mm-hmm.
Because 2 kids and broken washing machine and other stuff that needs to be fixed. So that's what I have left over for game budget.
Yeah. And in the meantime, all this past week, for the past 2 weeks, so for anybody who's listening, if you're looking for a new show to binge, if you happen to have Amazon Prime, so you've got Amazon Video, I think it's on Amazon Video. Yeah, I'm almost positive it's Amazon Video. I've been watching Suits, and that's a fantastic show. I'm amazed at how they take something that it would seem so boring. We're talking about high-powered lawyers who go in and do like contract deals, contract negotiation.
Mm-hmm.
It's not really exciting. It doesn't sound very exciting.
Pencil whipping the fine points of $1 billion contract.
Yeah, absolutely. That's what the show's about, but it's actually really good. It's so good. I can't even explain it. It's just so good. Harvey Specter, I think, is my favorite television character by far in any TV show I've ever watched. Harvey Specter is
that's pretty high accolades there, sir.
Yeah. So definitely check it out if you're looking for something to binge. There's nine episodes. I don't even know if all 9 episodes, 9 seasons. But I'm not sure if all 9 seasons are actually on Amazon Video Prime or whatever. Because I remember seeing 5, and so I don't know what I'm going to do if I can't watch the remaining 4 seasons.
You're going to be like the people that were watching Lost and like broke down in tears and were threatening suicide at the end.
Dude, it's terrible. We were watching. What was that show? 911. There's a show called 911. It's like set in Los Angeles. I think it's LA, and it just follows a group of firefighters. Well, it kind of flips a little bit between like there's some firefighters and then there's a police officer who's kind of gets roped into the mix, and a 911 operator. And and it just kind of bounces around from these different, it's like a cop show but set with
Yeah.
firefighters. And I got really hooked into that show, and I can't remember which season is. I think it's all on Hulu. The first season was on Hulu, and then the third season is currently, or was the last few weeks, last couple months, was on air. So the third season is the latest one, but season 2 unavailable unless I buy it. So I'm not very happy about that. It's like it's not on Netflix, it's not on Amazon, it's not on Hulu. It's just like here's season 1 to get you excited about the show, and then jump to season 3. I'm like, I don't want to do that, man.
So are you going to buy it?
I'm trying to avoid buying it because it's $20 for the season.
That's a yes. That's a yes.
We'll see what happens after I'm done with Suits, and if I'm jonesing to go back to 911. I really like the 911. I really like 911. It was kind
CSI
of
911.
See it. I don't even think they have CSI on Hulu or Amazon Prime.
I don't know.
I liked that show initially. I've only seen a handful of episodes.
Yeah,
but
I didn't mind it. But then it kind of broke off, and then there was Miami and NYPD CSI AGTF, and I just
in Vegas.
Yeah. So I lost interest after one of those letters. I don't know.
Yeah. Oh, that's good stuff. So we've got before we jump into into our topic, I want to get some people up to speed on some of the stuff that's been happening the past week in terms of news.
Okay.
I think we're in a really dumb timeline right now with everything that's going on.
Oh yeah.
In terms of, we've got all of these demonstrations, these protesters. We're in the middle of a presidential election, which I don't think most people are following any kind of presidential election politics yet.
No.
Most people don't until summer, or until, I should say, the end of summer. So I don't think a lot of people are really involved in the polls, and I don't think most people care. We've also got all of this COVID stuff that's been going rampant. I heard a great phrase online the other day called the control-a-virus, and I really liked that.
Yeah, that's awesome. I like that.
Yeah, I liked that. Yeah. The control-a-virus.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, there's a lot of craziness that's been happening, and I found this. I found an interesting article. This was from Oregon. Article out of Oregon, and Oregon, at least around Portland, has been a hotspot for a lot of these Black Lives Matter protesting that's been going on.
Yeah.
At least for the last year or so. I think you might remember BLM. They built their own seclusion area. It was like the first autonomous zone before autonomous zone was cool. And they built their own little area there. I think that was like a year or two ago. I can't even remember now.
I think it was. Yeah, they were hit before everyone else was square.
Mm-hmm.
They were wearing the skinny jeans before they were in, kind of thing.
Yeah.
So, and you got to do me a favor for just you and me, if nothing else.
Uh-huh.
Quit saying BLM.
Why?
Because
Bureau of Land Management.
That's all I get is the Bureau of Land Management when I hear BLM. Because when I'm out wandering around the woods and I go, oh, that's BLM land over there. That's where my brain's at. Yeah. So.
Fine. Fair enough. So I found this article here, and there's a place called Lincoln County, Oregon. So health officials in Lincoln County, Oregon are reportedly exempting residents of color from wearing coronavirus masks.
Ouch.
In public. They're exempting them.
Isn't that, that's dangerous. How is that not encouraging the Black population to contract coronavirus? That's racist.
I don't know. It says, the article goes on and says, official said, that's a weird way to start it, but it says, official said they made the decision amid heightened concerns about racial profiling and harassment. Also saying no person shall intimidate or harass people who do not comply. So in other words, there are Black folk who are normally get racially profiled, right?
Right.
Other citizens or cops might racially profile them. And so because of racial profiling and harassment, people of color do not have to wear those masks when they're out in public.
Oh, okay. So they can't actually contract the controller virus.
Yeah, apparently.
Oh,
So I think
okay.
that's,
Or infect anyone else.
I mean, what are we doing? What are we doing? What as a society, what are we doing? I mean, you either have to, I mean, we've had people for weeks now screaming and yelling, wear the mask, wear the mask, wear the mask. Oh, not everybody has to.
Well, everybody has to, unless you're Black, apparently.
Right. How is that? I don't understand how any of this goes back to that. And this kind of ties in actually to the whole concept that we're going to talk about tonight about, do you want to be treated equally or do you want to be treated fairly? Mm-hmm. And a lot of times the Black Lives Matter movement says we want equality. We want to be treated equal. We want equality, but not in all things. So some people are more equal than others, apparently.
Mm-hmm. Well,
here's, I have a question for you and for all the listeners. I want people to ponder this. And this has to do with those stupid coronavirus masks that, the face masks that everybody's walking around wearing all the time now. Okay. So if you remember, I want you to think back. Remember when the masks were starting to become a thing? And there were people who said, you know what, the masks don't work because you have to have a specific filter. So you're not necessarily protected from the virus. And there were a lot of examples of saying that's like trying to stop, the virus is so tiny that whatever mask you put on your face, it's like trying to stop a mosquito with a chain link fence. I think you heard about that analogy. A lot of people have heard about that analogy, correct?
Sure. Yep.
So there were people that said, no, you have to wear the mask. Yeah, and they even conceded. They conceded and said that the mask isn't going to protect you, the wearer, mm-hmm. but that wearing a mask is going to protect other people around you. In other words, if you cough or sneeze or just in the act of speaking, right, the spit particles, your spittle isn't going to go very far.
Well, and what they've said is that it's not an airborne disease.
Right.
It's droplet.
It's droplet. So you can't get, me talking at you, you're not going to get sprayed, right?
Right.
That's the idea. Okay. Yeah, fair enough. Fair enough. So then they made that argument. And that's a pretty fair argument to make, I think. I think that's a totally fair argument. Yeah. You know what? Okay. So how come you can't wear it off your nose?
How come you can't wear it off your nose?
How come you have to have your nose covered? Why not just wear it like this?
Well, you suppose you can spread droplets out of your nose, like you mentioned, sneezing or going out your nose or whatever. I mean,
yeah, but most people aren't walking around, spraying stuff out of their nose. They're not sneezing.
You are actually okay, here's where you are fatally flawed. And okay. I love you for it. You are trying to apply rational logic to an absolute pandemonium-driven situation. I love you for it, but shame on you. We actually have something at my work I started a long time ago. And you remember the old swear jars? If you swear, you had to put a dollar quarter in, or now, with inflation, now it's $1.50 or whatever it is on your place of business. I started the logic jar. We bought lunch a couple times for the whole office. Anytime you use actual logic, you put $1 in the jar. So I'm going to start one for us here at the Fusion Underground. And you have an IOU now, sir. That's $1 into the logic jar for you. Of
$1?
Shame on you.
Because, I was just thinking about, there are a lot of people who say that they have a discomfort wearing the masks. And a lot of people that I've seen online or that I've talked to said, yeah, they don't like it. It gives them anxiety, or they can't breathe. They feel like they can't breathe well through it and all that. And I thought, well, just uncover it off your nose, because you're not walking around, spraying people out of your nose all the time. Even when you're speaking, things aren't flying out your nose, 4 feet away. And if somebody were to sneeze on you, well, it doesn't really matter if the mask is covering your nose or not, right? Because the virus particles can go through the fabric. So what difference does it matter? So just bring it down off your face, off your nose a little bit.
Well, I'll take it a step
know.
further and go, okay, some of us have to have regular testing for our job. Well, if you're not sick and you've tested negative, even day of, why are you wearing a mask at all?
Right.
Because back to what you're saying, if it's not protecting me, the wearer, but protecting everyone else from me, the potential carrier.
Right.
If I'm tested and I'm negative, then why the mask?
Why bother? Yeah. So anyway,
I
thought
owe
that was
$1.
interesting.
I'm sorry.
And there's new information that's been hitting the interwebs lately too, talking about the testing. So there are reports saying that you can pop positive on a COVID-19 test if you only have the cold or certain strains of the cold, because certain strains of the common cold are coronaviruses.
That's correct.
So there's now some reports saying, you know what, you can be given the COVID testing, not actually have the specific SARS-CoV-2, I think that's what it's called. So you might actually have a viral strain of the common cold that is a coronavirus, and it's popping positive on those. So who knows what these numbers actually represent anymore? No,
well, I will absolutely tell you that the numbers are for lack of a better word, all jacked up. But I do know in a professional healthcare setting, if you get the rapid test, that's that they do the 1 day and it comes back at the same day testing. That's the rapid quote unquote testing, and that is positive. Then they do the full send out testing for it's the SARS-CoV-2, and that does not the common cold will not trigger that as a positive.
Right. And then I know it's the quick ones that they're trying to get out en masse.
The rapid testing, and those are not supposed to basically rule in or out for COVID necessarily. They're supposed to be first indicators.
Correct.
That's the idea.
Correct. But because you're dealing with coronaviruses of the common cold type, of the common cold strain, there's a high possibility that you can actually pop positive and not actually have the COVID-19.
Correct.
But see, most people don't work in that healthcare environment.
Right.
So if you go to your local clinic and you actually have one of those coronavirus common cold strains and it pops positive, now you think you've got COVID-19, you go home, they tell you to monitor your health, guess what? You got tested. So now you're getting put into the statistics of anybody who's tested positive. I don't think we really understand who has it. I don't think we understand. And I think there are so many people who are getting sick, who have gotten sick and never got tested. And the true numbers, we have no idea.
No, well, and as I told you before, honestly, I really do believe that everybody is going to get exposed to it. Everybody will. Just like the common cold or the flu. I mean, you might have a small percentage of the population, call it 10 to 15%, who might sneak by and never get exposed to it because they lived in their closet for the last 6 months. Well, kudos. Everybody else will. And then we'll get over it.
Yeah.
You will. I am not, I'm not downgrading the seriousness that this can.
I don't want to downgrade it either.
To other people, I don't want to downgrade that at all. But I mean, look at this last wave of exposure. You know who the highest percentage of population of the demographic getting hit is the 20 to 35 age group. Yeah. Well, that's the age group of the population that basically been locked up for the last 3 months from their job and have basically been fed up and said, that's it. I'm done with this crap. And they're back out there living their lives. And the rate of exposure has increased dramatically. Absolutely has. But the amount of cases that have required hospitalization is actually significantly less. And in those hospitalization cases, the length of stay required in a hospital level setting is about 10% of what it was previously, because they don't have the comorbidities. They don't have the other issues going on. And it's like, okay, well, that was a nasty freaking flu. That kicked my butt for a couple of days. Can I go home now?
Yeah. You know, what's interesting is you can pull the data off of the daily totals of everything. And I've been looking at the daily totals, one of the things that I found that is really interesting in looking at the entire data set is that, especially in Arizona, because I'm more interested in what's going on in Arizona, because Arizona is now considered the hotbed, right? The hot zone for COVID-19, all this kind of stuff in the media. And what's interesting is when you look at the numbers and you look at the hospitalization rates over time, of those people who tested positive for COVID-19, and there's going to be a subset of those people that end up having to be hospitalized. Back in early April, the percentage of people that got hospitalized was up close to 40%. It was like right around a little bit above 37%.
Yeah,
so
it was a high ratio. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so 37% of people who were popping positive were going into the hospital. And that was a very scary thing, obviously, right? Mm-hmm. But over time, that percentage of hospitalizations for positive test results has been declining and has steadily been declining in Arizona. Yeah. And now we're under 4%. So we're at right around 3.5, 3.6% of the positive cases have to be hospitalized. And that has consistently trended down, even though the number of cases, positive cases has increased.
Correct.
So there's some interesting some interesting stuff going on there in that data.
Exposure rate's gone up and hospitalization required has gone down. Length of stay required has gone down. And that's from the very first case that's gone down consistently, really, as far as that goes. Right. And I think there's a handful of reasons for that. One of them, I do believe, is we prepared so heavily for the worst case scenario, right, that it's like, oh my God, Bob is positive for COVID. Well, we got to get him in the hospital. We got to get him in the ICU. We got to have a ventilator standby, and we're going to hold him here for 2 weeks because we don't know what's going to happen because we didn't know.
Right.
I think that is a huge factor. Am I saying that's the only factor? No, but I do believe that was a big part of it.
Right. In other words, I think what the percentage numbers, I think one of the things that are contributing to this is that downward trend of hospitalizations is that medical professionals are recognizing how and when to treat it.
Sure. No, we're gaining understanding of it as we go along. And I've made the true joke with you before that medicine is a practice.
Right.
I mean, that's why doctors have a practice. You learn as you go. And in this disease, we're learning what are true indicators of life-threatening symptoms and what is, okay, you're going to be all right. Just, stay out of the sun, drink lots of water, and take your vitamins and go home and get some rest.
Right. Exactly. Okay. Switching gears here.
All right.
I got another thing. So there are a lot of protesters around the country who are pulling down statues, right?
Yeah.
I've seen a lot of that going on. Particularly they're pulling down statues that have to deal with, people that were alleged racists or slave owners or whatever.
Do they really know? Sorry, that's me just asking a question. It's not a logic one either. Do they really know?
No, I don't think they do. I think they just see a statue and pull it down. I mean, there have been many statues that have been pulled down that the people were abolitionists.
Yeah.
That were freeing slaves and such. So they don't even. No, they just see a slave, or they just see a statue and it's like, oh, let's tear it down.
Yeah, it must be a racist white male. Has to be. Right. Because that's all we ever erect statues for,
right,
people who are like that, right? That's
right.
So it has to go.
So now there is a petition underway to rename Columbus, Ohio.
The city
Columbus, Ohio. And here, I'm reading from the article here. As Columbus, Ohio's mayor announced that the city's statue of Christopher Columbus will come down, a petition is circulating to rename the city Flavortown. Yeah.
Flavortown.
So
is Willy Wonka's chocolate factory there? Because that's about the only way that makes any sense to me.
See, I didn't understand this either, but there's you may have seen him there. He's a chef celebrity by the name of Guy Fieri. He's got some.
Was it?
TV
Does he do the
show.
diners, drive-ins, and
I think that's him. I
that's the
think
one?
that's him with the
Yeah,
spiky blonde
with
hair
the
and
frosted tips and
yeah, yeah, yeah.
the different colored stash, and
Yeah.
yeah.
I
Okay.
think that's him. He was born in Columbus, Ohio. And I guess he's got some catchphrase of his that he uses the term Flavor Town. I don't know. I've never watched the show.
Oh my God, really?
So because I've never watched the show. So because he says Flavor Town, he was born he was born in Columbus, Ohio. So now they want to rename this. They want to rename it Flavor Town. Dude, I don't know.
I will add
I only
that
work
to
here, man.
the God Almighty. I'm sorry. I will add that to the places I will not seek retirement in, because I don't want to retire in a place called Flavortown, USA.
Yeah. So I have another article here, switching gears away from Columbus, Ohio, and Flavortown.
Okay. Yeah.
My biggest thing about stuff that goes on, stuff that we see, is really has to do with the media.
Right.
A lot of my frustration about what goes on has to do with the media and the way the media reports certain things. Because I think a lot of media and journalists are heavily slanted to the left and rather than being in the center or to the right. I think because they slant to the left, they have a tendency to attack anybody who they perceive to be on the right side of the spectrum, and that includes Donald Trump. So, of course, anytime Trump says something, and again, what I'm talking about right now is not a defense of Trump. He can defend himself. I really don't care about that.
Right.
But this is really about the media and the Washington Post in general.
Oh.
And so I want to set the stage, because I want to share this part of my I want to share this article with you so that you can actually see it. So there's this guy. So you can see that Trump keeps claiming that the most dangerous cities in America are all run by Democrats. They aren't. This is from the Washington Post. Okay.
And they backed this up with data. I'm certain.
Oh yeah,
right?
we're gonna get there. Oh,
All
yeah.
right. Go ahead.
So this guy right here, Philip Bump. So he basically, I don't know, man. I only work here.
I'm sorry.
So
Go ahead.
So he takes issue. Philip here takes umbrage with the president, claiming that the most dangerous cities in America are all run by Democrats.
So before we get into that, I do have an observation, and it's something that I think is tying into what you're talking about with media bias, and whether you feel that that's biased one way or the other. But this is something interesting I was talking about just the other day. You notice when there is a Democrat or liberal, depending upon how you choose to classify, in the Oval Office, all media refers to that person as the president.
Correct.
When it is a Republican or conservative or
just the last name,
it is just him.
Correct.
So I find that very interesting.
Yeah, so do I.
Okay. All right. So, just an observation. Continue.
So Philip Bump goes through this whole diatribe of how terrible it is that the president, blah, blah, blah. But then he gets here. And this is the great stuff. Remember, Trump said that all the dangerous cities are run by Democrats. So he pulled some data. Mayoral party in cities with the most violent crime.
So
one of them.
Whoa. Of the data pulled, and I'm just looking at your, and I want to make sure that we pull this out here. There's what would you call that? 50 cities?
There are 20. Well, so the 20 top cities. Part of, for those that are listening here, I'm showing now a graph, and there's two graphs. The first part of the graph, the top half of the graph, okay. Each of them shows 20 cities. Each graph shows 20 cities, but the top half shows the overall 20 cities with the most violent crime. Okay. And New York is at the top of the list. But out of all these 20 cities, 17 of them are Democrats. Correct. 17 of these cities are run by Democrats. 2 of the cities, San Antonio and Las Vegas, are run by independent mayors. And only one, Jacksonville, Florida, is run by a Republican mayor. And Jacksonville, Florida is the fourth one from the bottom of the list.
Correct. So if I'm just a innocent bystander viewer of said data,
Mm-hmm.
this to me would support an argument that the most violent cities in America
Are run by Democrats.
Because that's what your data is showing.
And then on the bottom part of the graph,
Mhm.
here we've got per 10,000 residents. It's showing violence per 10,000 residents. Memphis, Tennessee, and that has always been a very hot spot for crime. But now we've got 20 cities here. So it's cutting the data a little bit differently in regards to crime. So we get some different cities that pop up because we're looking at per 10,000 residents. And out of the 20, not one of them is a Republican. There are
Correct.
19 of them are Democrats. One is an independent, and that's out of Springfield, Missouri.
That's correct.
So what's funny here is Philip Bump and the Washington Post bent over backwards to try to disprove the president. And in doing so, they kind of stubbed their toe and tripped over their own data and, in a sense, made the president's point for him.
Now, what I really don't understand, and this is genuine confusion, so please help me here.
Mhm.
Because let's pretend I am an editor at the Washington Compost or Post, and I read Mr. Bump's article as it comes across my desk, and I'm the editor, and my job is to basically approve all of these articles for publication.
Mm-hmm.
And he says in his title that, and lays out a very detailed argument here how that is just absolutely wrong, and how dare that man say that. And I actually see the data come across my desk as the editor. How the heck do I not throw this back in his face and go, either publish it as an editorial, because you don't have to prove anything in an editorial, and most of the Washington Post is an editorial anymore, or don't include the data. What is wrong with you?
I don't know how this. I don't know how this got through an editing process, because as an editor, I would have thrown this out. I said, "Dude, you're making the president's point for him,
yeah.
And you're going to make us look like an idiot."
But God bless the Washington Post for putting that out there, which did source all this data from the FBI Uniform Crime Report that was January to June of 2019. So that's awesome.
Isn't that fantastic?
And they really actually put that out there. There was nothing after that that's saying, I know the data looks bad.
No, they didn't do any of that.
Pay no attention to the man behind the curtain.
Yeah.
It's not really that way because we said so.
Right. Essentially what they're trying to say is the president said all 100%. But look, we were able to pull some data and we showed that it wasn't all 100%. It was just the vast majority of.
No. Stop it. Stop. And this is serious. Pull that back up, because I believe in the title of that article, he said, Trump said that the most violent cities. Now, the most, it can't be all if it's most.
Where was it again?
And he's right in that regard. If Trump said all, I'd say no. I wouldn't believe that. But if you want to say the most,
the article's title is Trump keeps claiming that the most dangerous cities in America are all run by Democrats.
Oh, wait. So there was. Okay, so he's saying not the word all in that is wrong. That the most ones are all run. You're correct. Out of 20, number 17, sorry, of the most violent actually is a Republican. There's one in there.
Yes.
Which if you actually look at the scale and see how many violent crimes are reported, New York is about 6 times as high as I believe that one. And you said, where was that? Jacksonville, Florida?
I think it was Jacksonville.
Okay.
Jacksonville, Florida. Yes, Jacksonville, Florida.
All right.
So, and again, this is not an indictment this is not me trying to defend Republicans against Democrats or anything. This is a critique of the media. This
Absolutely.
what I'm talking about here is a critique against the media. This is a journalist who is going out there with a bias, creating an article that is just ludicrous, that makes his own publication look redonkulous,
Mhm.
and the editing team saying, yeah, it looks good, let's run with it. And it's just,
Well,
and then the media wonders why nobody trusts them. And then the media
no,
wonders why everybody thinks that they lack integrity. And everybody wonders why the concept of fake news continues to churn its way through America's psyche.
but I'm really glad for articles or being able to actually see things like this. And remember, this is not just some article off of some random, you know, feed out there on some platform, or some blogger put this up on some, you
This is
know,
Washington
obscure part.
Post.
This is the Washington Post,
Yeah.
people. And this is exactly why we started this podcast, to look at things critically. Just think for a minute about what you're hearing. If you're out there and you're gobbling stuff up whole just because it was on TV or in a in the paper, I mean, even just reading it, you don't have to be a deep or critical thinker to read through that and something go,
What?
wait, this doesn't make any sense. I must have misread this. Let me do that again. This is happening everywhere. Everywhere.
Yeah.
Everything that you guys are seeing out there on TV or in the media, it's blatantly contradictory of itself.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you don't have to look hard to find it, but you have to be willing to look at it.
Yeah.
To see
Yeah,
it.
it's definitely a bit redonkulous, I think. All right.
All right.
You know, there's one of these days we're going to have to talk about like white fragility and and racial identity politics, because I've got some doozies lined up that we should talk about that at some point, just to make fun of some scholars.
I'm a pretty fragile white guy.
Are you now?
Yeah, well, didn't you know that about me?
I don't think we'll get into it. I don't think we don't have to get into it. Right? Yeah, we don't have to get into that right now.
That's not a good idea. Maybe that's not a good topic. I might do that on my own and not bring Jason along for the ride, so that we might have 3 of our 5 subscribers left out there.
Right. We should definitely talk about that at some point. Okay.
All right.
So let's dive into the topic here.
Okay.
About, is it better to be treated equally or fairly? Now, the reason why I came up with this topic, this is a question that I actually ask a lot of people, that when I'm doing some kind of an interview for a job, for a position, I've asked it of people interviewing me for a position. I've asked it of people whom I was interviewing to say, yes, let's bring them onto the team. And while I'm interviewing them, I'd love to ask the question of, do you think it's better to be treated equally, or do you think it's better to be treated fairly? When I ask it, it's not a gotcha question. Mm-hmm. I'm not trying to set somebody up. I don't have a specific answer that I'm looking for. I ask the question because I'm really interested in the person's thought process around how they evaluate it. And most of the time when I ask the question, people are often taken aback. They don't,
imagine that.
It was like a question that they weren't really, how do I answer that? There's nothing wrong with the question, but it certainly catches them off guard.
Yeah, it's not on your crib sheet for interview questions to prep for the night before.
Yeah. And what's interesting, I've probably in the years that I've been asking this question, I think I've probably asked this question of maybe 70 or 80 people. And I'm not exaggerating. I've asked that of about 70 or 80 people. Do you think it's better to be treated equally or fairly? And I have yet to have a single person say equally.
Why do you think that is, since you've got the most experience of the two of us?
It's really interesting. I compare and contrast that to sort of the zeitgeist of what's going on in the media. Right. And I think if you exist in the media bubble, you think that equality is a big thing, right? We see that right now with Black Lives Matter. We see that with Antifa. We see that with people who are studying race theory, for example, right? And they're putting out these things on race theory and white fragility and all this kind of stuff. And people love these, the people that are pushing these kinds of ideas, they always speak about equality.
Mm-hmm.
Feminism is out there that's speaking about equality all the time. And so what I find interesting about it is you would think, well, if people are really living in that bubble, then they would probably right off the cuff say equality. But the majority of people that I interview, that I speak to, they have not one single person has said equality. And they think about that and they say, you know what, I would rather be treated fairly. And of course, I always follow up with, well, why do you think that? Why would you prefer to be treated fairly as opposed to equally?
Sure. And
they, they go through a very cogent argument and rationale and explanation about why they would rather be treated fairly, all of things of which I would agree. And I kind of nod and say, okay, thank you very much. And I think at the end of the day, I think people recognize, I think the vast majority of Americans recognize that if I'm going to be treated exactly like you meaning I'm going to be treated equally with you, I have different needs than you.
right.
I have different wants than you.
But
So
that's breaking it down to an individual level. And I think that's probably the key of where the the disparity comes between when you're in an interview, you're trying to interview for you. It's just you. You're not representing an entire race or an entire culture or a group of people. All of a sudden, when we actually talk about a group, because let me flip that around. So let's just pretend, and this is going to sound terrible, and this is why I'm doing it. So bear with me. You as an individual, you say you think it'd be better to be treated fairly for you. Now, if I said, all right, do you think it would be better for the Hispanics in America to be treated fairly or equally? Without answering the question and just leaving it sit out there, just think about what that sounds like. Okay?
Well, it's a political question.
Exactly. And fairly, well, who gets to judge fair? What does that mean? Well, you think we're being treated fair now. Well, we're not. We need to be treated. That's where that all of a sudden that entire thing switches, and a whole race or a whole demographic or a whole culture now needs to be treated equally. But if you take it back down to the individual, we don't want to be treated equally. We want to be treated fairly.
Right.
So,
and I think most people in America, in my opinion, live at that individual level. I think people love to talk about or think about or postulate about groups of people. But when it comes right down to it, at the end of the day, people are, they want, it's about themselves and what is right for them. And when we look at what's right for them, I think a majority of people want to be treated fairly. And that's what people tell me. Now, I will say this with this caveat, we're talking about a lot of people who are interviewing, the vast majority of people that have told me this and have given me this explanation, they're interviewing for a job.
correct.
So I have to recognize that, I don't know why they chose fairly. I didn't ask them. I didn't have a lengthy conversation with them after the fact and really dig into their wants and desires to try to understand why they chose fairly. It's very possible they could have picked fairly because at the time, given the specific context of a job interview, they felt that might be the most correct one for me as the interviewer. They
may not have believed that, but they thought that's what you wanted to hear.
It's possible. It's possible that's how they answer. But given the vast number of people and their reactions to the question, I'll even tell them, I'll say, I'm not interested in a right or wrong answer. I'm interested in what you think. Mm-hmm. So hopefully that kind of dispels it a little bit. But at the same time, I've also asked this question of people who were interviewing me for a job, and there's nothing writing on the line for them.
Right.
And
actually, if they have to figure out what kind of answer you want to hear, they're probably going to say, you know what, thanks very much. Don't call us, we'll call you.
Exactly. So, but they actually go through the process. I haven't had a single person tell me equally. I've had everybody tell me fairly. Now, me bringing that up is not to try to say that I know what the vast majority of Americans think. That's just a hypothesis. I think it's an interesting hypothesis that could certainly deserve more exploration outside of an interview setting. But I wanted to unpack that because I think it's an interesting question. And
Sure.
you know, what does it actually mean to be treated equally versus what does it mean to be treated fairly? So let's start with, what does it mean to be treated equally?
So equally means the exact same with no distinction or consideration of the person or situation. That is black and white. You know, Bob gets one, Sally gets one. Bob gets two, Sally gets two. That's it.
And I don't like the outcomes of that. To be
No,
perfectly honest, I
nobody
think
does.
when people stop and think about it, for example, you know, there are a lot of situations, especially in a work environment, where you could be treated equally, to your detriment.
It 90% of the time it is actually. So, okay, I'm going to start from the back of the argument, and I'm going to work all the way back to the front.
Okay.
So you start. My opinion, of course, I do believe that I would rather be treated fairly, and I think it. I try to treat others fairly. I don't treat people equally. I've got a son and a daughter, and my wife and I have already had this discussion. I will treat them both fairly, and I will love each one of them individually as much, but I'm going to treat them both very different because they are very different. One's a boy, one's a girl, one's the oldest, one's the youngest. They're going to be treated different.
They have
That's
their own
just,
different unique
they're
strengths
going
and
to be
weaknesses and
unique
needs.
people.
Yeah.
For me to treat them equally would be unfair. Now, taking that a step further, I actually love debating equality, especially with anybody who's got that on a sign and a post and they're marching out in front of City Hall saying equality now, for whatever it is. Have you ever seen the movie Jack Reacher with Tom Cruise?
Yeah.
Okay. Right before, when he goes outside of the bar, right before he's about to whip those 5 guys, he gives them the opportunity to walk away.
Mm-hmm.
And then he says, all right, well, just remember, you wanted this. I really would like to say, okay, you want equality? Here it is. We are going to do equality. And we absolutely 100% clean slate, get rid of all of the special considerations for everybody, and everything is on the exact same level. That means when you are testing, let's say for the police academy, if you're a man or a woman, you do the exact same amount of push-ups, you run the mile in the exact same amount of time, and you meet all of the same requirements. Same goes for the military. That happens. When it comes to college, you have the exact same SAT requirements and the same scores and the same grades required of you, whether you are white, black, Hispanic, Asian, Latino, doesn't matter. Guess what? Same. There are no scholarships for anybody based on racial inequality, income inequality, or anything else. The cost of a semester of school is X amount of $10,000s per semester, period. That's it. That's what equality looks like. There is no special consideration for anyone. And I would challenge anybody out there who's actually sitting there with a sign saying equality now, there is not a freaking chance you want equality, because it does not look pretty for you.
Well, I think most people, when they say equality, I think they have a different concept of what that means in their head.
Sure.
I think what a lot of times people are thinking of is they're misconstruing fairness with equality, because true equality is really about, at least the way that we've defined it in this country. And I'm not talking about the people on the street, how they define it. I'm talking about how our institutions define equality. And that's typically, especially our government institutions anyway, our government institutions typically look at equality as you are equal. We are all equal in front of the law. In the eyes of the law, you are equal. which means if I murder somebody or you murder somebody, that the same types of penalties, right? The same types of due process, to determine our fate is going to apply, so that equality of the law will be applied to us.
Yeah,
So we're
those are
equal in the
statutory
eyes of the law.
minimums for a lot of
Exactly.
crimes for that reason. Correct.
Exactly. But then there are people that I think that when they hear equality or what they're fighting for in terms of equality, and I think these are more of the people on the street. So we've got that institutionalized equality before the eyes of the law, and then you have the people on the street who are marching for equality. And I think what they are trying to fight for is an equality of outcome, which is a lot different, which is a completely
Correct.
different thing.
Correct.
Because they rile against the haves versus the have-nots.
Mm-hmm.
They get upset at the 1% of millionaires, or 1% of the wealth holders, right, versus the 99%, in their words, right, to use their words, the 99% that don't have anything.
Sure.
And so I think those people are really talking about equality of outcome as opposed to the equality of opportunity.
No, absolutely. And I'm all for having an equal opportunities. Absolutely. And that's why, I'm not out marching for getting rid of some of those like scholarships. If you don't have the financial means to pay for college or things like that, I believe that everybody should have opportunity to succeed, the opportunity to increase their station in life, the opportunity to do well. But to say that equality of outcome is a right is ludicrous. Equality of outcome is absolutely impossible. It's impossible. I made a joke, a serious joke, but it was a joke, an episode or two back. It's been a while. It was actually in our discussion about mentoring, because I was talking about, let's just pretend my son never grows up past 5'2", okay?
Mm-hmm.
And maybe he's a little chubby, and he wants to go play basketball for the NBA. It's probably not going to happen for him. Now, I understand that there's the Steve Nashes and John Stocktons of the world and the Muggsy Bogues who actually made that work. You know what? Kudos for them. But the likelihood is he is not going to be able to dunk a basketball like Patrick Ewing or some of the other basketball players out there in the NBA. That would be wanting equality of outcome.
Right.
He's not going to have that. But that doesn't make me a terrible person for making him understand that. That makes me a good father. And so do I think he should have the opportunity to go play sports and go do stuff and go learn and go seek an education and to be successful and to have a family? Yes, I think he should have the opportunity. But the responsibility for that lies on him to be able to obtain that if it's within his realm of possibility. And so am I for equal opportunity? Yes. Do I think equal outcomes are reasonable? No, they're not even possible.
Well, and there are people that I think they take the idea of fairness, and what they're doing is they're looking at at what they consider to be fair treatment as a way to correct the wrongs of pre-existing inequalities.
And that's trying to say that you don't want equality, you want exceptions. You don't want to be treated equally, you want to be treated exceptionally. You want exceptions to be made for you for the sake of sins of the father or sins of the past, whatever those are perceived to be.
And I'll give you an example of that. We see this heavily at the university level. So you have many students have to go and they have to take the SAT test in order to figure out where they stand, and a lot of colleges where they stand intellectually and knowledge wise, and a lot of universities use SAT scores to admit students into their universities. And some schools say you have to have a high score, and others will set the bar a little bit lower. But what's happening is what we're seeing across the country is Black students typically do poorer on SAT scores than whites. That's not to say all of them.
Mhm.
You know, there are Black kids that study hard and they deserve every point that they get when they take that SAT. And there are many that
Absolutely. Yeah.
there are some that score really, really high, and they're exceptional students, and that's fantastic. I'm not talking about them. I'm talking about when you look at the average numbers of Black students compared to white students. Black students tend to do poorer on SATs than the white students do. And
Right.
so, of
Well,
course, this has created that sense of, well, we need to redress, we need to correct this inequality by being fair. And the way they want to change that is they want to lower the bar for some of these, for the Black students, or give them bonus points, so to speak, to raise their scores up, and basically give them, you know, give them a handicap for being Black.
well, and that's not fair. Sorry to say, but that's not right for them. Nor is it. And I'll flip it on the other side of the argument. And I think I was talking to you about this before. You know, the Asian demographic traditionally scores extremely high on the SATs.
Yeah, they even outperform the whites.
They are, I believe, the highest
Yeah.
of all demographics for actually SAT scores.
Yeah.
And now the colleges are having such a high influx of Asian students into they're actually being asked to raise that minimum acceptance level for Asians.
It's disgusting.
That's terrible.
It's absolutely
no matter
terrible.
how you slice that, it's absolutely it's wrong.
Yeah, it's absolutely terrible. You know, and a lot of this, you know, a lot of this stems from a lot of the acceptance that teachers have on Black kids or kids of color. You know, when I was teaching college classes, I was teaching college in most of the students that came through my classroom were from very economically depressed parts of town.
Okay.
And they would take my class, and I was told by numerous students during my time there that I was the one teacher that they had that actually challenged them and encouraged them to do better. And the vast majority of students that came through my class would find me in the hallways, and they, you know, even after they were done taking my class, and they would say, "You were one of my favorite teachers because you were the only one who challenged me." I would have students all the time tell me, why wasn't I ever treated this way when I was in high school? These kids don't know any better because they've been treated this way for so long, because a vast majority of their instructors, I'm not talking about all instructors, but the instructors that these kids typically saw, the instructors saw them as being incapable of doing the work. And really what these students needed is they needed instructors who believed in them and who were willing to set goals for them and willing to set a standard and say, you can meet this because I just know you can meet that. And these kids rose to that challenge.
Sure. Well, and you know, this is the same issue we have, and I know this is going to sound rudimentary, but I apologize. We don't hand out trophies to the winners. We hand out trophies to everybody. Everybody gets their participation trophy. We don't challenge anyone in the elementary, middle school, high school levels to actually, you will do this and you need to rise up and study to make the grade or you will be held back. We don't fail anybody out of school anymore.
Right.
I mean, that just doesn't happen because it's going to be psychologically damaging to them and what that's going to do for their peers and their development. You know what? There's a lot of kids that probably could learn a heck of a lot more from going, oh my gosh, this is real. I need to step up and do this and take that hard knock of being held back a year so that I can go, okay, this playtime's over. You know, this is real, and learn from that. Those are real life lessons. School is not about just learning that 2 + 2 = 4.
Yeah.
It's about learning how to think, how to take responsibility for yourself and your own actions, to take the work that's assigned to you and make it your own priority to complete that. That's learning how to go through life. I mean, how is a boss going to handle somebody like that when they say, well, Sorry, I gave you a specific task. You had a deadline to meet. You didn't even get started, let alone fail to meet it. You're gone. You're fired.
And there are some people that look at equality as like an equal an equal probability of outcome, and that becomes the definition of fairness. So in other words, if they're looking at, they want to be treated fairly, but fair to them means they have the equal probability of being successful in a given thing, and that too in and of itself is ridiculous.
Yeah, no, that's absurd.
Because I'm not a hockey player. I don't, I can barely just remain upright on a pair of ice skates. But that doesn't mean that I had a barrier, that there was that I was discriminated against from learning how to skate. The thought never crossed my mind.
No.
And there are some people that are really good at it, and they had the opportunity to achieve that. So there was never a barrier. There doesn't need to be an equal probability of me becoming an ice skater, a good ice skater, so that I can play hockey. That is a warped sense of fairness and equality as well.
Sorry, I had a warped sense of imagery seeing you on ice skates actually around the hockey rink. That's pretty warped in and of itself. Well, and
Yeah.
Paul, actually, your good buddy Paul talked about something like this when we were talking about art, because he described art as a skill, not a talent. So it's not something that you're born with. Now, I still argue with him on that. I think some people are naturally talented in that arena. However, I can appreciate that that talent goes to waste if you don't develop it like a skill. But that being said, he talked about how he didn't do anything else growing up but draw. And now he is an artist. Well, if I'm going to go to art school at 30 and I did everything else but draw that whole time, and I'm barely getting stick figures down because they're a little bit more complicated than I thought, I'm behind the 8 ball. If I still want to do that, and I still have the opportunity, obviously, I'm in art school, I'm going through it. But to say that I'm going to be able to have the same easygoing time as somebody like Paul may have, and that's not to take away from Paul's, work that he put in, I'm going to have to work 5 times as hard to get close to the same outcome that Paul may, because Paul's been doing it for, 20, 30 years. I mean, that's just reasonable to understand and expect, or it should be.
Well, yeah, but people don't look at it in terms of like doing art, right? The development of a skill. They look at it in terms of just doing an office job.
No, I'm in a have-not position.
Right. And so, there are people that, they just graduated college, they have no work experience, and yet they're holding out for that managerial or directorship. Even though they don't have anything to back that up with, right? They're just holding out for that because they went to a good school or something like that, right? And because what they want is they want that equality, or they want to be treated with that same level of dignity and respect that somebody who has already had 20 years worth of work experience behind them, right? And they don't understand that, well, you're nowhere in their league. You're not comparable to their skill set, their knowledge, and the talents that they can bring to the table.
Yeah.
And you have to develop those, just like you have to develop your skills in artwork. And so what frustrates me is when people start saying, well, we need to be fair, and we need to treat everybody equally, right? We need to have everybody in an office setting making all the exact same amount of money as the high VPs or directorship or manager. Everybody needs to have that same, the equal level of responsibility, equal level of pay, equal level of benefits, and all of that, because we're all working for the same company in the same office space. And that, quite frankly, is just absolutely ridiculous.
Yeah, well, and there's a way to do that. There is a way to do that. You actually take everybody. So the only way to make the entire social structure, the classes, if you will, especially in the workplace, equal, you're not going to be able to physically bring everybody in the lowest class, so to speak, up to that level. The only way to do that is to bring everyone else down.
Right.
Because just if you think about any other company, any organization, if you are employed, you've seen an organizational chart. There is one guy always at the top who has a handful of minions over here, and then they've got their 30 minions over here, and then slowly, and then usually when you see that organizational chart during your orientation to the company that you're going to work for, and after about 50 levels of growth, you see, oh, here's me way down here at the bottom. Now, if you're like most people, you go, well, that means I got a lot of work to do to start climbing that proverbial ladder before I can get to right about here's good, because I don't want to be that guy up at the top. Yeah, he makes 9 times what I probably ever will, but there's a reason for that, because he's got all those other people that he's in charge of. And you know what? When something goes wrong, it all goes back up to that guy. I don't want that. But I'm not going to be down here. And thank you for hiring me for this position. But how come I'm not making as much as that guy up there? That's not fair.
Right.
No, not gonna.
Yeah, it's not going to happen. You know,
I owe to the logic jar again too. Darn it. Let me get my wallet. I left it out here. There's another $1.
You know, and a lot of times we typically see this because of income. We typically see when whether it's coming from feminists, or it's coming from Black Lives Matter, or it's coming from Antifa or whatever, we typically see the cries for equality, to be treated fairly, in a negative way. I'm referring to like the equality of the probability of outcome and all of that in terms of being fair. We tend to hear that because people keep using things like, well, or phrases like, I just want a livable wage, or living wage, right?
I heard a lot of that during the whole Red for Ed thing, which was really interesting.
The big Red for Ed thing was a big thing here. Several states throughout the United States were doing the whole Red for Ed. Teachers were lamenting that they were not making enough money and they needed to make more money. Oh gosh.
Yeah, we could do a whole, I love teachers. I really do love teachers. I'm going to say that about 4 or 5 times. I love teachers, but I don't know another profession in the entire country where you can actually just not show up for contracted work and keep your job. I also don't know any other profession out there that you can get paid to not work for 3 months and keep your job.
Well, it's even more egregious. It's even more egregious in cities like New York City, for example. So New York City is one of the hardest places for school boards to fire teachers, bad teachers. There are many teachers within the New York school system that deserve to be fired, that they should be fired. And the school boards even recognize, yes, this is a terrible teacher. I'm not talking about the good teachers that happen to be in New York City. I'm talking about the bad ones that should absolutely be fired from their jobs. But because of their teachers unions, they can't be fired. And the school boards can't fire them. They can't be moved around or anything. And so they go and sit in it's like a community center type of an environment. And every day these bad teachers who get relegated to the community center, so to speak, they show up first thing in the morning, like by 8 o'clock in the morning, and they read books, they play cards, they hang out, they talk to one another. And then by 4 o'clock, they leave for the rest of the day, because they have to, under the guidelines and the rules of the unions that they have, and the contracts that the unions have signed with the cities, the school districts cannot fire the teachers. The school districts must continue to pay these teachers, but they're too bad to be in the classroom. So they send them to basically sit and do nothing all day. And they have to show up, because if they don't show up, then they can't get paid. That's why they actually show up to the community center, because for them, that is actually work. And there are some teachers that have been involved in that have been doing this for years, because they can't be fired. That's a problem. And yet we're allegedly treating them fairly. I don't think we're treating them fairly at all.
No,
we're not.
No.
And we're not treating the taxpayers
No,
of
to
that
heck with the
city fairly
taxpayers.
as
Nobody,
well.
nobody cares about that part of it.
I mean, what's
Um,
fair? Is it fair to the taxpayers to continue to pay money into a school system where the dollars are not actually being used the way that the people want the dollars to be used? Is it
well,
fair to the taxpayers to pay these teachers tens of $1,000s every year per person to sit in a room and play pinochle all day? Is it
well,
fair to them?
is it,
Absolutely not.
was it fair to parents to try and figure out how they're going to be able to work and take care of their school age children because the schools closed down because the teachers decided they just wanted to go on strike because they weren't happy with their working conditions? Is that fair? Like I said, I can get on that all day. And I apologize for taking us down the sidetrack.
What irritates me about the whole thing with teachers, and I tell this of anybody, I've had to have this. I've had to look myself in the mirror and have the same conversation in my own head about this.
Mhm.
If you're so miserable, or if you really are legitimately being treated unfairly in your workplace because you're a teacher and you're not getting paid what you think you're worth. I know plenty of teachers who they not only have a bachelor's degree, but they went and got a master's degree so they could make more money and secure their place in the teaching hierarchy in their school systems. And they still complain that they don't get paid fairly, right?
Sure.
They don't have a living wage. Well, then quit.
Yeah.
Then quit. You have that choice. That choice remains an option for you. Quit
That's equality
and go
of
do something else.
opportunity exists
Absolutely.
for you. 100%.
Quit, go do something else.
Yeah.
I've had, and I tell people that because I've had to do that. I've had to do that where I think, you know what? I don't think I'm able to advance more in my career where I'm currently at. There's nothing here for me anymore. There's nothing good for me to do. I've kind of run the course as far as what I can achieve here. And I had to have those conversations with myself and say, self, I think it's time I need to move on and I need to weigh that decision. And yet some of these teachers continue to teach, 10 years after being told that, well, you can quit, and they don't want to quit.
No,
Well,
no,
then I don't have any sympathy for you.
That takes the actual effort and gumption to, again, do the work. This is real. I need to do it. This is my assignment. I've got to take care of it. It's no different than the kid being held back a year in school. You have to be able to say, to look yourself in the mirror, and I'm going to use your word, hey, self, it's time to pull yourself up by your own bootstraps and make a change if you're that unhappy. Let's go. Nobody else is going to do this for you. Right. And that's the key point right there, is where I think we were talking about this fairness versus equality. The idea of when I'm out marching and shouting for equality, I want somebody else to make my life better for me without having to do anything to get there.
Right.
If I say I want to be treated fairly, I want the opportunity to show you that I can do this as good, if not better, than the next person over here. Because that's the opportunity I want. That's the opportunity afforded to me that I need to be able to prove. And there's a lot of I in there. And nobody that is out there marching and shouting equality ever wants that for themselves. They want everyone else to do it for them. That's the biggest difference, I think, between equality and fairness.
Well, the other thing that really irritates me in terms of, these concepts, these arguments that protesters typically have about being treated fairly versus equally. I see these college students that march, and they get really angry over the 1%, right? And they're marching because they want a job. And I, back when the whole 99 percenters Occupy movement, if you remember that a few years ago, there were a lot of students, a lot of college graduates who were newly minted college graduates who were walking in these Occupy movements. And I remember watching interviews with a lot of those recent graduates, and many of those graduates complained that they had $100,000 worth of student loan debt and they couldn't get a job. And well, I don't have a lot of sympathy. I don't have a lot of sympathy. You just because, and to some degree, I think our society has sold college students a load of crap.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, get your degree and you're going to make 100,000 a year.
Yeah,
Period. End of story.
our society has continuously told young people this: go to
Mhm.
college, you'll be successful if you go to college. Now, yes, there are statistics that show that college graduates typically make more money over the span of a career than somebody with just a high school diploma or somebody
Mhm.
without a high school diploma. But that's not true for 100%.
Well, no, and like when we talked about whether college it has value in our society, I think that was
Mhm.
what episode 2, somewhere in there.
Somewhere in there early.
Um, I still believe that degree can open a door for
Sure.
you that
Sure
might
can.
otherwise be closed. But that is not going to get you an automatic in a management position or CEO of some company that's going to pay you $100,000 with zero experience. Not going to happen.
Correct. So
You
correct.
still have to be willing to do that.
So we have these young graduates who have been sold this bill of goods by society saying go to the university and get a degree. And so what they did was they went to the university and they got they got ridiculous degrees. And I'm like,
Right, underwater basket weaving
you
with a
know,
social services
well, if you're, I'm sorry, but if you're going to go to a university and you're going to take out $100,000 in student loan debt and major in something like feminist studies or classical studies, even,
right,
you're not going to get a job. I'm just,
right.
you're not going to be marketable. You're not going to have any skills coming out of that. And the reality is if you're going into something, and there's nothing necessarily inherently wrong with feminist studies or classical studies, but you have to recognize that you can't just go and get the bachelor's degree for that. You're basically trying to build a career in academia, which means you got to put on more and more, pile on more and more student loan debt if you really want to do something in that particular field. And so now these students have $100,000 to, in some cases, $200,000 worth of student loan debt. They can't get a job because what are they going to do? They know nothing about finance. They know nothing about business. They know nothing about, entrepreneurship. They know nothing. They know a lot about classical studies. They know a lot about, Ovid. Great. Right. And, and I think what we have to do as a society is we have to tell students, look, what you need to do is you need to look at the ROI of getting a college degree. Yes. Okay. If you're going to make if you're going to have $100,000 of student loan debt, then go get a degree that's going to pay dividends on your education.
Sure.
And that usually falls in the STEM categories, science, technology, engineering, and math. But there are a lot of students who don't want to study those kinds of degrees because it's
they're
too
boring.
hard. Well, it's too hard.
Yeah, and it's hard. I mean, again, if you want to go get a classical studies degree, great. That's cool. I'm good for that. But what are you going to do to make money? There was I don't know whether I want to say it was a progressive commercial. No, Geico couldn't help you from becoming your parents. That was one of the things. These people are sitting at a restaurant, right? And the waitress comes up and she's in college and she's getting her degree in art or something like that. And the lady there goes, "Oh, that's great. Have you thought about how you're going to make money?" Geico can't save you from becoming your parents or whatever it was, So I always laugh at that, but yes. Could I hear my parents saying that? Yeah. And you know what? Thank God they did.
Yeah.
Thank God they did. Somebody needs to be able to come to these students and go, okay, you want to take a $100,000 loan out in feminist studies. Great. What are you thinking about actually doing with your degree? And that's not saying that's a dumb degree, but if you can't answer what is your plan, even if you have a plan, have at least an idea where you're going with some of that stuff. I mean, and so take all of the isms out of all that. I don't care if you're getting a degree in underwater basket weaving. You know what? That's cool, man. And right now, I don't think there's a huge supply of underwater basket weavers out there. You may be able to corner the market. Well, but is there a market for that too? These are just very simple questions. The opportunities are there, but you've got to be willing to make it happen.
Well, and a lot of this equality and fairness and these kinds of Occupy movement marches and things, they revolve around income. And there is a way, and there is data that supports it, that breaks down what people need to do to get out of poverty and join the middle class of America. And there's essentially three rules, and economists have been looking at this and studying this for decades, and there's tremendous data to support it and consensus that drives it. And that is, there are three rules to get out of poverty and join the middle class. And the first rule is finish high school. Finish high school. Have a high school education. It doesn't say get a high school diploma per se. It just says get a high school education.
High school. So that's high school diploma or GED.
Or GED. Finish high school is the first rule. The second rule is work full time.
Fair.
Go get a job working, even if it's at McDonald's, but work full time.
Full time.
Or if you're unable to get a single full time job, then go get 2 part time jobs.
There you go.
Right, so that you're working
essentially
full-time.
Pull in 40 hours a week.
Yeah, that's the second rule. And then the third rule is wait until the age of 21 at minimum before you get married. And along with that rule is also don't have a baby before marriage.
Okay.
If you follow those three simple rules, then the odds are overwhelming, to the tune of about 72% likelihood that you will leave poverty and join the middle class.
Yep. That's fair. And I'm middle class America right here.
Yeah, but
nobody wants to be middle class. That's what you're missing. That's the biggest. Everybody's got the idea, well, equality means I should be I should be in the highest class because they are. So why can't I? That's equal. No.
Well, so I think there's a deeper problem that's rooted in our society, and I think it poisons people's minds to get them to constantly think about this thing about equality.
Okay.
And I think the thing that poisons our minds is that in our society, we tend to look at what others have and be envious of what they have.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
And I think that drives all of this. If we taught people and we reinforced in our culture not to be envious of the things that other people have, I think people could find happiness even if they didn't make as much money, even if they weren't part of the 1%, right? But of course, all of this trickles into things like, well, millionaires need to pay their fair share.
Sure, yeah.
Millionaires do pay their fair share.
Well, and we talk about fair again. If you really want equality, oh my gosh, what is it? The top, what they say, 1% of earners pay 45% of all taxes in this country.
Yeah.
Do you want to know what this country would look like if the top 1% only paid the exact same wage based bracket that you do as far as taxable income goes? Oh my gosh, we'd have no money in that just overnight. So
and that's a bogus argument anyway, because of having the millionaires pay fair share. Who was it? Bernie Madoff said that his secretary paid more percentage in taxes than he did. I think that's what he said, something along those lines. I think he was the one.
Okay.
Or was it? Might not have been Bernie Madoff. I think it was somebody else. Actually, now that I think about it. Anyway. But because that's a bunch of that's just absolute ludicrous. A lot of these executives, yes, there are executives that have $1 million incomes, but when you break it down in how they actually get paid, often a lot of executives, for example, in business, don't get paid they don't get paid their $10 million take their $10 million in income as a straight up paycheck.
No.
So when people say, well, we need to raise the taxes, we need to raise income taxes. This is the issue that I have with Congress, right? Because Congress says, absolutely, let's do that, right? Let's raise the income, because they know nobody's going to get hit by it. Nobody's going to get touched by it, because very, very few millionaires have a paycheck that's in the, they get paid through other things. They get paid through stocks and dividends and investments and investment opportunities and such. And so if you raise the income taxes on the amount of money taken out of their paycheck, they don't make enough. They're not getting a $10 million paycheck divided over 52 weeks.
Right. Right. And it's the same. That's the same basis of the argument for even raising the minimum wage, which I don't, I don't understand how anybody out there, at least the people who usually contribute to the logic jar anyway, can actually look at the whole idea of raising the minimum wage and say that that is in any way good for anyone. You're just driving the cost of everything up, which means that the job that was paying you $10 and now is paying you $15, that $15 doesn't go a third as far as the $10 did before, because everything's gone up exponentially since. And how that doesn't make sense for everybody, I just don't get.
Well, the fairest wage is $0. That's the
Right.
fairest wage. Because what people fail to understand is even if you're making $0, you're still learning something. And there was a time, I think now it's illegal. I think even interns now have to have some kind of hourly wage or salary in order to work. It used to be that interns never got paid. Interns worked for $0, zero payment. But what they did earn during that time was experience. Yep. And they did earn connections with other people in their industry and in their field.
Well, and that lent a lot more on a resume to another job that you did your internship with, you know, ABC law firm or whatever it might be. They're like, oh my gosh, you've got, 5 years of experience or whatever it is under your belt already. Mm-hmm. Yeah, welcome aboard.
And many interns were in the past and even today are still awarded a job when they finish school, working with the company with whom they interned. Well, and because they know the people, the company knows them, and they said, well, I don't want to let this person go. They're teachable and they have a lot of great qualities and skills, and they already know my business. So I'm going to hire them in.
And we've got some potential interns even in my work right now. And that's one of the options that we've got is actually the first option to hire. If we had somebody in there and that they're doing a great job and it's like, gosh, I don't want to have to make you go through all this stuff. Yeah. We just basically sign you up as soon as your internship's over. Welcome aboard.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's a foot in the door. That's worth its weight in gold already.
I want to touch on, because you brought up the whole, why people don't understand how raising the minimum wage negatively impacts pricing and things like that. And I think that's a great opportunity, even though I think it might be a little bit divergent, but I think it's a great opportunity since you opened the door to try to explain that to people. I think the biggest thing that people fail to understand or fail to realize is that your wage, a wage of a particular worker, is really the price on that labor. Mm-hmm. So rather than thinking of it in terms of wages or a salary, people need to think of it in terms of price. It's the price for somebody's labor. And when we refer to it in price, I think most people tend to understand prices better. Most people tend to understand supply and demand. They tend to understand that if there's a high supply, that forces prices to be lower.
Correct.
If there's a high supply but low demand, right, the prices will change and all of that. And so when we naturally increase the wages or inflate those wages, especially for minimum wage earners, what ends up happening is you're increasing the price on their labor.
Right.
And so when you have these companies that hire in those low wage earners, you've now increased those managerial prices, the prices on those managers. And like anybody, when a price of a commodity or an object goes up, people tend to go, well, I don't need so much of that anymore.
Right. Right. Well, and if you want to change it to, let's say cost, for a better way, maybe to even understand that too. So, and I'll pick on, we'll just say burger joint A. Okay. If you go to the burger joint, that hamburger might cost that company, $1 to make, because it's not just the beef and the lettuce and tomato and onion and ketchup and mayo and the bun, but it's also the cooks that are there, the people working the drive-through window and the counter. For that 10 minutes or whatever it is that burger was actually being prepared, all of the cost of everything that place paid for that one burger to be created, that's your set cost.
Well, that's
If you
also electricity. That's also lease
everything.
space.
Right.
It's all of that.
Right. So when you increase the cost of
Labor.
the labor, just those, let's say there's even only 2 people, and you raise it by $5 per hour. Now for that 1 hour, it costs you $10 more, and that's just for your slice of it. Not to mention the beef that you got, the tomato that you got, the lettuce you got, the hamburger of the month, because they all have places that now their costs have gone up. So that hamburger that cost you, as the owner of that business, $1 to make, which you were selling for $2.99, now costs you $5 just to even get there. Guess what? That hamburger now costs $10. When's the last time you went to a fast food place and were willing to pay $10 for a hamburger? You're not. So now the demand goes for that. And guess what's going to happen? Now those people start losing their jobs, because if I've got to pay that much and I've got to bring my price point down so it's palatable to the consumer. So yeah, my prices on a Big Mac Whopper, single stack or whatever it was, it's now maybe I can't go from $2.99 all the way up to 10, but I can absorb a lot of that in the price and only make it $5.99. But that means I've got to do it with one person instead of the 3 that I had there. So now you make the workplace conditions terrible. You put 2 people out of job, and you're still complaining about the price of a hamburger when you go, because you're one of those people that got let go of your job because they can't afford to keep you.
Well, and when those costs go up on the company, there are a lot of companies that have done this. The minimum wage goes up, and then what they end up doing is the company looks at their total costs, as you said, and they say, well, our total costs have now increased. And so what we need to do is we need to cut back on the hours. So you may have been working for me and making, working 35 hours a week, but now I'm going to cut your shifts back, and you're only going to work no more than, like, let's say 28 hours a week or 30 hours a week instead. So now you're losing out on your income. And in interviews with people where they're working minimum wage and their minimum wage increased, their actual overall take-home pay decreased because their hours were cut.
Right. Exactly. Or they were the lowest tenured employee and they got cut entirely, and that's happened. And not to mention that you've got other people who were just climbing out of that minimum wage group and starting to actually make headway. And all of a sudden now their entry level people are making the same, if not even more than what they were. And they're like, to heck with this. Right. I can leave and be the entry level person at the next burger stand down the way and actually make more money. Then come to find out they got cut, and it's absolutely terrible. And don't think for 1 minute that the people who are actually sitting at a desk who get these bills and all of these ideas coming across their way don't know dang good and well what everybody out there marching is actually asking for and what it's going to mean. Because to them, doesn't affect them.
Yeah.
Matter of fact, it actually helps because it gets to line their pockets. The more prices go up, wages go up, taxes go up. Who gets paid based on tax revenue? That would be the people that go, yeah, we approve that bill.
Well, and that's what a lot of people, I think, don't realize is if you increase the minimum wage per hour, it's essentially a backdoor tax. It's a backdoor tax on income because it inflates wages, and those people pay more in taxes. And so, governments can recoup. The idea is they can recoup more money through the taxation of those higher wages, without actually having to raise taxes on wage earners.
Right.
So it's a backdoor tax. It's a type of backdoor tax.
It's disgusting. And unfortunately,
all in the name of fairness, remember, because it's about a livable wage.
No,
it's about earning a fair wage.
Yeah.
And so we destroy people's ability to actually earn that wage. So all in the name of fairness.
Yep. Way to go. Good job. And guess what?
Good job, everybody.
There's no way back. You don't. When's the last? Have you ever seen minimum wage go down? No. And you won't. So yeah, that gallon of milk that you get excited about because it's on sale for $2.99. See ya.
So I need to apologize to our listeners.
I
need to apologize to our listeners. When I first put together thought of the idea of doing this particular topic and talking about fairness and equality, I had no intention of talking about, um, poverty or talking about racial differences in doing that. I think it kind of happened simply because of, I think it's a reflection of how crazy things have become in our own society with regard to race relations. And so that was not my intention, was to talk about, look, all of this kind of stuff and compare it and contrast in terms of fairness and equality. So I'm actually surprised that we went there, that it went there.
Well, I am, but I'm not. I think, yeah, when you and I first talked about equality and fairness, I don't think either one of us had that in mind. But yes, there's been such a heavy inundation with the social inequality aspect that's being shouted from the rooftops out there right now. It doesn't surprise me that that's where our discussion kind of went down. I think when we first talked about this was even something as simple as the idea that the grass is always greener on the other side.
Mm-hmm.
And why does my neighbor get to have the boat and the camper and the always gone on vacation and doing all that kind of stuff? And, I'm scrimping and saving, trying to just make ends meet. That's not fair. I think that's kind of really where we were first looking at this and really, I guess, trying to really get everybody to take a look at all the things we actually do have. I don't have a huge wage. Your wage outranks me by a lot. But you know what? I make a fair wage for what I do. I have some perks in my job. And I'm truly blessed and I'm grateful for that. I've got a beautiful family, a nice home, and a good job. And I'm really blessed in a lot of the things in my life. And yeah, I see my neighbor or one of our brothers right over here gets a new camper, and I'm like, man, that guy, man, you got to be kidding me. I want a camper. How come I don't get a camper? And that old Saturday Night Live skit, where's my stuff? I want stuff. But that's just stuff. That's not the value that I look to in my life to really uplift me. And I've got a lot to really be thankful for. And I don't need to look outside of my yard to really see a lot of the blessings in my life. So.
Well, I think people need to have a holy grail. I really do. And what I mean by that is I think people, if people try to figure out what is the holy grail that you want to go after, and I'm not talking about material possessions. I'm talking about what is it that you want to accomplish in life that is going to enhance you spiritually, emotionally, and psychologically. Go after that. And so I'll use an example. If your holy grail is to help others by healing them, okay, you want to be able to heal them, you want to give them a better quality of life for the sick, right? Then you might pursue something like becoming a medical doctor. Now, you might reap really high rewards for doing that, especially if you become specialized in cardiovascular surgery or neurosurgery, for example. You're going to make a lot of money. But if you're pursuing it not because of the material gains, but you're pursuing it because you truly have a calling to heal the sick, because that is what makes you fulfilled, then you'll reap the rewards. But if you truly have a calling to become an artist, and let's face it, it's hard to make money as an artist. I think every artist will probably agree. Or if you say, I have a true calling to be a teacher, right? There are people who do that. Everybody knows that teachers make crap for income. Everybody knows this, right? It's always been, for as long as I've been alive, everybody has always said teachers don't make that much money. But if that's your calling, you're not going to make a lot of money, but that doesn't matter. So, if you can learn if we can teach people to focus on those holy grails and be happy based on achieving the holy grail, not in terms of material wealth, then it doesn't matter what you get paid. If you get paid little, well, then you get paid little. If you get paid a lot, well, then you get paid a lot. But guess what? Even if you get paid a lot and you happen to lose it, you're still not going to be upset over it because you're pursuing your own holy grail.
Yeah. And, You know that I really do believe in the adage, make more, spend more. Money is not going to buy happiness. Sorry to say. It might be a really good means for you to buy the things and get the things that might be happiness for you, but they're short-lived, in my opinion. That's mine.
Well, you're absolutely right. People tend to spend in proportion to the amount of money they make. And so there are people who don't have a lot of money who say, well, if only I had a lot of money, then I would be content. Well, the truth is most people would still spend the money that they have.
Yep.
And just because you happen to be a very successful neurosurgeon making, several millions of dollars a year, if that, there are people who make that kind of money and they still have money troubles.
Yeah, and don't I can tell you firsthand, there's a lot of medical professionals. We'll talk about surgeons and doctors out there who literally went bankrupt just in the last 4 months.
Mm-hmm.
You never know when that kind of stuff happens, and yeah, because they spend based on their income. Most people do. It's not saying that people that make lots of money are not frugal with their money either, but it's just the reality. And don't look for money. Don't look for the zeros to tell you if you're happy or not. Don't look over your fence to see what everyone else has to tell you what you think you need, what's equal or fair. Turn around. Look in your own windows.
So
you might be surprised.
we got on the topic of with poverty and race relations in terms of equality and fairness for a little bit. I know we just kind of tap danced around those different concepts, but I think it's a problem, and I think in our society we are starting to explode in race relations right now for the negative. I have an article here. It's a peer-reviewed article. It's an academic article, and the title of the article is "Beyond the Face of Race: Emo Cognitive Explorations of White Neurosis and Racial Cray-Cray." That's the title.
Okay.
And I think this is very dangerous. I think we're entering into a very dangerous period of our culture and our society because of articles like this. One of the authors of this article is a woman named Robin DiAngelo. And Robin DiAngelo, she recently wrote a very successful, I think it was I don't know if it took #1 on the New York Times bestseller, but it's been up there in terms of bestsellers. She's making a ton of money over it. Good for her. But she wrote a book called White Fragility. And Robin DiAngelo, her entire thesis for the work that she does is that whites have unconscious bias, and that is really just another way of saying, well, you're racist no matter what you say or no matter what you do, you will always be racist because I will always be able to get to judge you for that because you're white.
No, and
essentially what we're saying.
I could almost agree with that that premise, because I hear that all the time.
Yeah.
Or we all do.
What I find really dangerous about this particular article that she wrote here, Beyond the Face of Race, she was a co-author, so there was another author, Cheryl E. Matthias, I don't know how to pronounce the name. I always screw up people's names. Essentially what they talk about is their frustrations in talking about difficult concepts related to race with white people. And in their scholarship, mm-hmm. They talk about how when you approach a white person and you challenge them on issues of race, that the white person will become defensive.
Imagine that.
And, well, I don't want to talk about this. They become really defensive. In some cases, they might become angry. And this is what causes people of color to become cray-cray, because it drives them nuts that the white person cannot talk about these very difficult issues. What they admit of doing in their article is essentially walking up and attacking somebody verbally and at least confronting them on these very difficult concepts of race, so that they get them flustered, they get the white person flustered and upset. And by them getting flustered and upset, well, that's just evidence and further proof of them being racist. That's what this whole article hinges on. I'm not misrepresenting their writing here. I find that to be extremely dangerous. And the reason why I find it dangerous is because the more that this becomes heaped on in our culture, in our society, I think there's going to be a very negative backlash. Now, I don't think we're going to see a rise in the Ku Klux Klan. I don't think anything like that is necessarily going to happen. I don't think we're going to see a rise in white on black crime. What I do think is possible is I think we're going to see a large number of people who are not black, okay, who and whether that's whites or Asians or Hispanics or whomever, I think there's a potential now to see non-blacks who are going to say, you know what, I don't even want to engage with black people anymore because I don't want to be accused of this kind of stuff. I don't want to be, I'm tired of being called a racist all the time. And I think there's a possibility that others will just disengage with members of the black community. And I think personally, I think that's scary. But I think we're on that road. And if
we're already there.
If black leaders of black communities don't recognize that and they don't take action to say, you know what, this kind of race baiting is despicable and we need to stop it, then I think it's going to become much more prevalent in terms of just people just choosing not to engage. Like I said, I'm not calling for people to commit crimes or to attack black people. I'm just trying to describe what I see, and I'm trying to say, well, where does this lead as a thought exercise? What does the end of this road look like, right? And the reason why D'Angelo, Robin, and Cheryl, here, the authors of this article, wrote this is because, well, they see this as another form of inequality, and they see this as, well, if we can engage and draw out these negative biases, we can, people of color will be perceived as being treated fairly and more equal, right?
No,
I think it's going to have the opposite.
No, absolutely, and it is, and it already is. It's nothing about any of this actually says unity. Nothing about this says let's come together as a nation of Americans and cohabitate. Right. Everything is about it's all about division, because divided we can be controlled, we can be manipulated, we can be utilized for whatever means. And I'm sorry, there hasn't been, I don't believe, this is my editorial portion here, I don't believe there's been a greater divide amongst the races and genders and even your socially identifiable gender ever in this country like there is right now.
Right. And it's not going to do any good for any kind of, whether it's equality of opportunity or being treated fairly in the workplace. It's going to dampen the good things that can come out of equality of opportunity and fair treatment in society, because I think the black community could suffer for it, because
every community is going to suffer.
Well,
for it.
Definitely every community. Community. Every community will, but I think it's definitely going to impact the black community, because you're going to have a vast majority of Americans who are not members of the black community that will just say, you know what, I don't want to engage anymore. Yep. I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to put myself out there because I don't want to be treated that way. I don't want to be treated like I'm a terrible person just because of the color of my skin. So I'm not going to engage with you.
Right. And yeah, it's like I said, that's happening already. But I think the divide widens as we go forward down this path, unless there's some radical change to stop it. And unfortunately, I don't know that that's going to come from any form of leadership, period. That has to come from us as the citizenry to say enough is enough.
Yeah. Americans have to stand up against this and say enough is enough. This is just this is ridiculous, and we can't keep doing this. I mean, in the article they talk about how there was another scholar who wrote some things on racial divides that existed 120 years ago. I know, I understand. There were deep racial divides in this country 120 years ago. I'm not faulting what that other individual wrote, but these two scholars, Cheryl and Robin, go further and say, well, since there was this systemic racism that existed 120 years ago, by virtue of blacks being born in our society that was systemically racist 120 years ago, blacks are inherently skilled at identifying the underlying racism perpetuated by whites. In other words, if your racism is your racism that you exude is invisible, these young black people can see it and they can then call you out on it. And I think that's dangerous.
It's incredibly dangerous. It really is. It's now, no matter you're silencing an entire race of people out of fear. And fear, not even for something that they may say, but something that someone else may interpret them to actually mean without them saying anything at all. And then even being silent then becomes racist as well. Yeah. I mean, that's the other part of it. So yeah, now we're getting even further on the racial topic.
So let's go ahead and let's
okay.
Let's stop there. All right. Well, do you have anything to say to sum up here? Everything that we've talked
I guess about? What I was saying before, I really like that song. The view I love the most is my front porch looking in. Yeah, every time I start thinking like I'm short on what I have, I try and go outside and look back inside and see what I do have. And I challenge everybody in that, in different areas of their life, whether it's especially things you're frustrated with. God, my job gave me a doozy of a week last week. So, it was hard at that point to look at some of the things I do have and some of the things that I do, the opportunities I do have there, and the leniency that I'm afforded in some cases with my job. And, it really does help at least ground you out a little bit. So look for those opportunities to see the things that you do have, not just the things that you don't, that somebody else might.
That's good. I love it. It's so beautiful.
Oh, stop up.
So beautiful and so poetic.
Shut up. I don't know whether you're tired or drunk, but
I've been drinking water all night. So
you're tired then.
A little tired, but definitely not drunk. Well, I think that'll about do it. Remember, everybody, you can catch us off of YouTube. We have a YouTube channel out there. If you go out to YouTube and do a search for Fusion Underground, you'll find us. We're also on BitChute. Just search Fusion Underground. We'll pop up there as well. We are on Facebook at facebook.com/AZ Fusion Underground. You can get all of our RSS feeds for the audio portion and links to BitChute and to YouTube directly to those channels off of our website at fusionunderground.net. There you can find all of the podcast feeds to Anchor, Breaker, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Radio Public, and Stitcher, or just grab the RSS feed itself and plug it into whatever podcast app that you have. I use BeyondPod on my phone, and I just plugged in I actually just did a search on Fusion Underground, and I found us. So we're out there. You can find it. Please send us emails. Tell us what you think. You can send emails to contact@fusionunderground.net, or just drop us some comments off of the Facebook page. We'd appreciate it. And wherever you're listening to us, please like the show. That helps get us more exposure and get it out there for other people. And by all means, share it with your friends. Share it with your family.
Heck yeah.
Let them know, you're listening to two imbeciles out there on the interwebs. And
hey, now, ignoramus, please.
There you go. There you go. All right, everybody. I'm on behalf of Jason Moret, I'm Manuel Ramirez. You've been listening to the Fusion Underground. Take care.
Take care.